and welcome to GLOBEWATCH with me, Charles EBUNE, 8 from the European Union residents here in Yaoundé, Cameroon. And you perfectly understand my guest on GLOBEWATCH today is the head of the European Union delegation to Cameroon, Ambassador Philippe Van Damme, who has come to the end of his diplomatic stay in the country. What are the latest developments within the 27 member association and its relation with Cameroon? Your Excellency Philippe Van Damme, welcome to this last interview on GLOBEWATCH, and thank you very much indeed for giving us the opportunity to talk to you on your departure line, just like your predecessors.
Yes, you're most welcome.
Let me just ask you this question at the start of our interview. What are the key priorities of the European Union today as you and I are talking?
Your priorities in Cameroon or priorities
globally
overall?
First?
Well, we have, of course, multiple priorities. The Commission, von der Leyen, as we call it, has identified the green transition as one of its priorities. But, of course, with the events of the last couple of years, we all realize that the multilateral order, as it had been defined after the Second World War, is under threat and has become a major priority. Peace and security. In our backyard, in Ukraine, of course, but also in Africa and in other places of the world, are major issues. The way we indeed jointly, worldwide, try to fight global challenges beyond climate change. We will also have the pandemic. We sometimes tend to forget it, but we had a major challenge there, and major new pandemics may arise anytime soon. So we really have to prepare ourselves for a difficult future.
You just identified climate change as one of the key priorities of the 27-member association with a population of about 500 million global citizens. What have you put in that package, let's say, for the past 2 years globally to mitigate the avalanche of climate change around the world as a champion?
Well, at the European level, to start with, we have, of course, defined a transition path to zero carbon emission by 2050 with an intermediate target of minus 55% emissions by 2035. So we have indeed in all EU member states indeed prepared transition measures, transition plans, but globally also in third countries we have encouraged our partners to follow the same path, and in Cameroon in particular, I think more than 50% of our development cooperation, for example, is earmarked as being green. That means that we are either in adaptation or mitigation type of measures. And we have, of course, also encouraged the government indirectly to move towards these green and digital transition. For example,
one of the issues you equally raised in your very first comments was the question of Ukraine. We are plus 20 months into the war between Ukraine and Russia, and some analysts may even extend it between Russia and the West. We will not remake what has happened. Do you think that you are closer to a solution of seeing a ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine?
I really want to be very, very clear here. It's not a war between Ukraine and Russia. It's not a war between Russia and the West. It's the Russian invasion, unjustified invasion, in a neighboring country of the EU. That's the core of the whole thing. So, as I have already said elsewhere, when the house of your neighbor is burning down, you better take care of him before the fire flows over to your house. So we have indeed supported Ukraine and its defensive efforts against the aggressor. Now, how can we come to a satisfactory end of this war? You will have to ask it, I'm afraid, to Mr. Putin. I don't know until where and when Putin wants to conduct this war. He is the aggressor. He has to decide when he wants to stop and at what stage he wants to withdraw. Because we all, and I'm coming back to my first preoccupation, which is the multilateral order, the post-war order, which is based on respect for territorial integrity. It's also a cornerstone of the African Union, by the way. So I think everybody has to sympathize, I think, with Ukraine, that this aggression is totally unacceptable.
The multilateral order you are talking about, which was established since the end of the Second World War in 1945, one of its key bedrocks has been the expansion of democratic governance throughout the world. Let me just go directly to Niger, where we had an overthrow without bloodshed of a civilian administration, democratically elected a few years ago. What will be the reaction of the European Union as a bloc to return Niger to a constitutional order?
Well, I don't think it's to the EU to answer that question. It's to the African Union and the regional economic communities, and in this particular case, the ECOWAS community, to find solutions. But we are so far very much aligned on the position of the ECOWAS and the African Union, is that this military coup is unjustifiable and unjustified. And you have seen the coup leaders, they haven't been able to explain why they took that decision. It's not about instability, because Niger was one of the most effective fighters against the jihad and violent extremism in the whole region. So they were effective. There was a democratic transition, as you underlined. So there was no reason at all to organize this coup, except probably very personal, egoistic interests of the coup leaders.
You said you are much aligned with the decisions of the African Union, which, of course, has suspended Niger from all its instances. You said you are very much aligned with the decisions of ECOWAS, one of them being a military intervention, possible one. Is that something that the European Union will support at any moment?
But again, it's not to us to decide about military interventions or not. I think everybody in the world agrees that you have to exhaust all diplomatic means before considering the military option. And it's to ECOWAS and the African Union to decide what to do at a certain stage. And we are external observers at this stage. But when you said the African Union has suspended indeed the membership of Niger and all cooperation has been suspended, we are following that line, of course, as well, to one exception, of course, which is humanitarian aid. Humanitarian aid everywhere in the world is always unconditional of political consideration, because you can't sacrifice the well-being of the people on the altar of political considerations, which also implies, by the way, that the humanitarian workers need to continue having access to Niger.
You just mentioned about humanitarian aid, which, of course, as a bloc, as a grouping, as an association, you are the largest humanitarian agency in the world, operating in so many portions of the world. And the Sahel is one of the areas you have injected resources so much in the past few years. When you see the progressive return of military governments in the Sahel, does that so much frustrate your humanitarian operations? Mali, Benin, I beg your pardon, Burkina Faso and others.
Well, it frustrates, of course, it complicates humanitarian assistance to people in need. That's obvious. The question here is more, I think, why do we observe over the last couple of years this succession of military coups in the Sahel region and beyond, including in Guinea? And my impression today is that maybe we have been focusing too much on the military side of the fight against jihadism, and we haven't maybe looked enough to the root causes of the attractiveness of this extremism, and we may have maybe not fully got right the balance between the security approach, the development approach, and the political approach, because let's not forget a lot of these government, and I'm taking exception for Niger, because Niger was a clearly fully transparent democratic electoral process which elected Mr. Bazoum. But in the other countries, of course, we had governance issues, clearly, corruption issues, major issues on the development side of things as well. And I think one of the lessons we have to learn from all these is that we overemphasize the security aspects, and we should focus more on governance issues and on development issues.
You possibly have connections, when I say connections, diplomatic presence in nearly each African country, roughly 54 of them, amongst them Cameroon. When you arrived here in 2021, what kind of EU mission did you meet in Cameroon? What was the nature of the relations then at the heart of COVID-19?
Well, it was a little bit indeed a strange arrival, because we were still in the middle of COVID-19, so my initial contacts were very limited, masked. But I met a delegation and quite representative country. I have served in several African countries. I haven't seen that many differences in terms of organization and challenges. Of course, Cameroon has its specificities. It's an extremely diverse country. We always speak about Africa in miniature, which is to a certain extent really more than a cliche. There's a lot of truth in that, which makes it complex. We have, of course, the conflicts in the extreme north with Boko Haram. We have the unresolved crisis in the northwest, southwest. So that makes things very complicated, because what you observe as well is that you have a kind of developing war economy in the northwest, southwest, with a criminalization of events and a kind of instrumentalization by some of the conflicts, which makes that you feel a lot of tension in society. There's a lot of tension in this society. And what strikes me personally, compared to other countries where I have served, is that you have a relatively limited number of platforms of exchange between people from different horizons and sometimes different opinions.
One of the areas, and before we talk about EU development projects in the country, one of the topics of your stay in Cameroon, like you rightly indicated, is the Northwest-Southwest equation. The government launched a humanitarian and later a reconstruction program. And around the world, people know the European Union as a key player of reconstruction, of humanitarian assistance. But the humanitarian assistance plan and reconstruction for the Northwest and Southwest has seen so many actors with the absence of the European Union being involved. Maybe I have the facts wrong. The public interpretation is that if the European Union does not participate in the reconstruction of the Northwest and Southwest, it's because they support separatists. Am I correct?
You're absolutely incorrect. 2 points. One, we are present. We are one of the largest humanitarian aid providers in Cameroon, and we are focusing on 2 regions, which are the extreme north and northwest, southwest. But we are not necessarily visible because our humanitarian aid is channeled through UN agencies, through civil society organizations, and so forth. So we don't publicize what we are doing, but we are doing it. And those humanitarians know it. So that's one. We also try to launch development activities in the Northwest, Southwest, but what we have been saying consistently, and that's the whole issue around the presidential reconstruction plan, is you can't move quicker than the peace process itself. That means that, of course, things have evolved over the recent years, and we are evolving as well. We are following the process on the ground, but as long as there is fundamental insecurity and questioning of some of the actions, for us it's difficult to fully get involved in reconstruction. But what we are doing, and we have launched a program a couple of weeks ago with the government of indeed increasing our presence on the ground, but mainly through civil society organizations, because what we need is to rebuild social cohesion at grassroots level in the villages. So what we are doing now is indeed accelerate our support, also with member states, by the way, towards indeed the most vulnerable people in the local communities within the Northwest, Southwest, but also in the neighboring regions where you have a high concentration of IDPs, internally displaced persons. And we are focusing on women, we are focusing on the youth, we are offering income-generating activities and so forth, so that we can rebuild the social structures, but bottom-up.
Yaoundé may possibly respond that, well, the European Union says that peace has not totally returned, so they cannot engage in spending their money in Cameroon, in assisting, of funding, but they didn't wait for peace to return to Iraq. They didn't wait for peace to return to Ukraine. A war broke out today. The next day, they were already talking of a reconstruction plan for Ukraine. That is how the establishment may interpret your comments. And how do you respond to that as an association?
Well, there's a difference between talking about reconstruction in Ukraine and reconstructing Ukraine, because as you know, I mean, as long as you're fighting on the battle, means that traffic is slowing down, is costing not only in time but also in money, because at each roadblock something has to be negotiated. So these are the non-tariff type of obstacles to regional integration. And we are working on that. We are working on these issues with CEMAC. We have set up a monitoring system at CEMAC level to see where are all these non-tariff obstacles, so that we can indeed help smoothen the trade flows between different countries in Africa. So we have to see our economic partnership agreement as one contributing element to regional integration. Now, the president of the EU Council, I think it was
Charles
Michel, I think it was at the EU-Africa Summit, or at one of the ministerial meetings in Addis maybe, I'm not sure anymore, who said, you know, we are fully supporting the Continental African Free Trade Area initiative. And as you know, we are by far the biggest partner of that initiative.
You spent almost 2.5 years here. If there is one single project you are proud of your stay here which materialized, what will you single out?
Well, that question has already been asked to me, so I have had the time to reflect on it. And, you know, when you ask parents to choose their preferred kids, they don't want to respond to that. But since this is part of the exercise, I will pick out the first baby born here out of these new dynamics in our development cooperation, and which is our support program to the northern regions, which we call the Green and Resilient Northern Region Support Program, which is interesting because it's the first real program which has been conceived in Team Europe format with the member states. I think it's extremely important that we increasingly work together with the member states so that we increase our efficiency, our effectiveness, but also the impact of our programs.
Of the nearly all the 6 European Union embassies in Cameroon?
Yes, okay. Indeed. So that's one. So it's our first real Team Europe program. Secondly, as I said, it's in the northern regions, which reflects our new priorities. And it develops this landscape approach, which is a very inclusive approach, where we bring everybody around the table, including the local authorities, so that we have real contribution of everybody. And it is, in my view, not only a very inclusive process, but also an exercise which proves that those different interests can be combined and that a green and transition is feasible in Cameroon. I always say Cameroon has comparative advantages in this green transition.
The last time I talked to the outgoing U.S. ambassador to Cameroon, or the outgone U.S. ambassador to Cameroon, Ballerin, I asked him, what will you be missing most in Cameroon as you are leaving? He said he will be missing the Cameroonian pepper. When I spoke to Christophe Guilou, whom you know so well, who is today the Director of Sustainable Development in the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs, when he was ambassador here, he said he will be missing the Cameroonian Ndolé. And when I spoke last time to Christian Denis Marclot, the outgone UK High Commissioner to Cameroon, he said he will be missing the natural ecosystem. And by the way, his last interview in Cameroon was done in the Mefu forest of Cameroon, which symbolizes love for nature. What will Philippe Van Damme be missing in Cameroon particularly?
Well, my case is a particular case because it's not only my departure from Cameroon, but also my final mission in Africa, because I'm retiring at the end of these missions. So the simplest answer will be I will be missing Africa. Africa is historically the oldest continent, as we know, but it's at the same time also the youngest continent, with half its population less than 18, and in one generation time, half the kids born in the world will be African. So this dynamism, this youth is something which I will miss.
And with that, we conclude the interview. The European Union Ambassador to Cameroon, Philippe Van Damme, thank you very much indeed. I hope as you are going on retirement, you will not be joining Jean-Claude Van Damme to do some...
My small brother there.
No, to do some theater work, so if you like the film industry. Thank you very much indeed,
so
and
much.
we wish you a safe return, I hope, in Belgium, and we hope to see you in Belgium if and only if I make a stopover in my next European. Thank you. Muchas gracias. Merci beaucoup.
Dank u wel.
Dankeschön.
Dank u wel in Dutch.
Okay. Thank
Which
you.
is my mother language.
Thank you.